Hello, everybody, and welcome to Life on Mars. I'm Alex, CEO and founder of MarsBased. And in today's episode, we'll be listening to Boris Paillard, one of the founders of LeWagon, which is one of the leading bootcamps in the world. Actually, one of the first we started collaborating with in Barcelona because their tech stack is based on Ruby on Rails as well with other technologies. And that's one of the defining traits of LeWagon, that instead of being just one bootcamp with just one technology, like many others do, I personally think they're doing a great job because they're teaching people how to develop, how to learn other programming languages, because they learn Rails, they learn React, they learn another set of technologies that Boris will be telling us during the interview. And that's precisely one of the best things about this bootcamp. One of my main grudges, basically, that most bootcamps just teach you one technology. So that really turns you into a developer of that technology. If they teach you only Ruby on Rails, then you will be a Ruby on Rails, not forever, but at least it will take you a little bit longer to learn other technologies. Whereas if you are taught how to develop in 2 or 3 programming languages right from the start, chances are you will be very good at learning other programming languages down the road. So in this interview, we talk about consolidating the market of bootcamps, why there were thousands of bootcamps out there about 10 years ago and why there are so few right now, what is happening, what's the future of education, how they do it to ensure that the quality of their bootcamp, their cohort stays consistent, cohort over cohort, why they have an internal set of developers working in the company who in turn are their teacher assistants or the teachers of their bootcamps. How did they start this? How did they bootstrap it? Why did they go for an investment round later on? And how do they plan to take over the world with LeWagon? So without further ado, I'll let you with Boris Paillard. Hello, good morning, Boris. How are you doing? Comment ça va?
Ça va très bien. Good morning,
Well,
Alex.
welcome to the show and thank you for doing this. We want to talk about LeWagon because it's basically nowadays, it's our favorite bootcamp. We have been collaborating with the LeWagon in Barcelona for many, many years. Yeah, big shout out to Gus, who was one of the big people in LeWagon in Barcelona, but I know that he's not involved anymore. As a matter of fact, next week I am speaking at like you guys organize some sort of event that's Get Me Hired, if I remember correctly. And so CEOs of companies are invited to talk if they do a fireside chat or something like that. And then in order to attract potential hires for the company. So, well, how did you come up with this idea? And maybe you want to introduce LeWagon a little bit for those who don't know it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, actually, we created the company a bit more than 8 years ago. Originally, I studied applied mathematics and a bit of programming at school, but not at all like web development. And I started my career in financial markets as a quantitative analyst. So basically doing lots of mathematics. And I just got bored. I was not, I didn't have any purpose at this time. So I was feeling a bit bored in my job. And luckily for me, I had friends who were developers. So I started to learn web development on my own. And just by learning that on my own, I discovered that there was a way to teach basically programming and software development with a way more product-driven approach, a way more efficient approach with the bootcamp philosophy. And that's where I decided to quit my job and launch one of the first coding bootcamp in Europe. So it was back in 2013 with my brother and a technical co-founder. And that's what the start of the adventure, basically. So we ran our first session 2014 in Paris with a very product approach. And we can discuss about that later if you're interested.
Absolutely.
Really focusing, I was teaching nearly 3 years. So I was very involved with actually teaching. I'm not a business person, I'm really a product person. And we basically had great NPS, great product, and we scale progressively to 45 campuses. And continuing this amazing ride.
But one of the things that was surprising when you showed me is that you were teaching in the boot camp for about like 4 years, if I remember correctly. That's something very different from other boot camps because well, we've seen at least that's a blunt opinion by me, and you will see that there's a lot of blunt opinions on this show. So whoever will get in trouble, it will most likely be me, not you. So you gotta be don't worry about that. So the thing is, like most coding boot camps, I feel it's like business people who thought they can make money out of creating developers because they knew there was a business market opportunity, right? And they learned that in their business schools. They validated and they're like, yeah, I can invest some time and some money on creating a team and creating like hiring great people, creating good bootcamps. They're like, I don't think any bootcamp of this sucks. They're pretty good, and you've got great competition out there. But only a couple of them, at least in Barcelona, they were created by coders, and you can tell the difference. So, so how long did you teach in the bootcamp for, and what do you think it gave to LeWagon?
Well, I mean, there are a few bootcamps that were created by coders in the US, for instance. But you're right. It's like I mean, it's not a matter of what's the best. It's just a different DNA and approach. Like there are people who start with marketing and sales approach, and then they build a product that can be great, but they have more like this business drive. For us, we didn't have marketing for the first 3 years, so it was mostly was building an amazing curriculum, finding great teachers, and iterating. We iterated on the content of our bootcamps more than 2,000 times. So it was a lot of iteration on the program, cohort after cohorts. So I guess it was just like our sensitivity. We wanted to be very involved, and I was teaching. I was building the first curriculum with my CTO. We were delivering the first cohorts. Of course, we were not alone, but then we continued to teach, for the first 3 years, because it's a long process of iterating. For me, this kind of very intensive technical training, there is a lot of difference that you can make from a cohort to the next one by iterating on the content. I could teach you HTML and CSS in 2 days. I could teach you the same in 2 hours or 3 hours. It really depends on how I iterate on this content. It's a very, an education of precision, of the right example, of the right method. And you need, for me, a lot of iteration on that. So I think that's where you can bring a difference. It's really by being very focused on the product. And from an external point of view, most customers, they won't see that. They will see the bootcamps as all the same. They all teach Ruby on Rails and JavaScript and SQL and so on. And for the customer, there is it's very hard to judge. And at the end, what matters is what alumni will tell you about it. It's the reviews you will read on student reviews. We are ranked first on all the student reviews platform with more than 2,000 5-star reviews.
Nice.
And sometimes investors, they ask us like, what's your magic trip? Are you paying people to read reviews or what? The real thing is like the product. It's just like we are very honest with this product, very focused on this, basically.
But one of the things that I know that as a developer, you can tell that LeWagon was founded by developers is that you still teach at least 2 programming languages, right? As opposed to other bootcamps that they can do better or workshop or are different, but they only do one development language, right? And for me, as a developer, that's a mistake, because if you teach somebody JavaScript, you're teaching them JavaScript. If you teach them JavaScript and Rails, you're teaching them to code, because it's like, well, you're learning 2 programming languages. You can use both on pretty much all the same things, but from learning 2, it's easier for you to learn a 3rd one.
Exactly.
I don't know if you get my point. My point is like, teach somebody to be multilingual so that they can learn more and more. They learn how to program in whatever language they wanna choose in their career. Not force feed them into doing only JavaScript or only Ruby, for instance, right? Why did you take this approach?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly for me, we took this approach for the exact same reason, because we are product person. So what matters to us, it was the best, choices for the interest of the students at the end. And so in some way, if we were very driven by the market, we will really focus on the buzzword like JavaScript, Node.js, because that's kind of what people are seeing in the job market. So it would be sometimes maybe easier for us in marketing perspective. But to our opinion, first starting with Ruby is a very much simpler language to learn for a beginner. So I think you need to be honest. When you do a bootcamp, you don't know anything, right? So there are people who do 3 years of computer science. And so you need a bit of, I think, being humble when you start. So for me, starting with Ruby is a great way to have the right concepts, to learn about software architecture, about MVC, to learn correctly about like relational databases and so on. And then you can add like a second language to each, like JavaScript. And as you say, you've learned 2 languages. You can see that there are similar concepts. And for you know the links in your brain, and it will be much easier to learn a third. Like if you want to switch to Python or to a new language,
correct,
then you've done that the first time. So I think it was for like education reason that we choose Ruby. And at the end, also, we discussed with lots of tech recruiters and CTO. There is a CTO of, I think, Doctolib in France.
Yep.
He
I
went
was going to say.
like, well, if you present me 2 junior developer that apply to a position at Doctolib, the first one is just launching at me all the buzzwords. I don't know, like NoSQL, Node.js, whatever. But if I ask some question about what's a relational database, what's a one-to-many relation, what's the MVC design pattern, then the person won't be able to really answer that with a robust answers. And if you take a second person that say, well, I'm very honest, I've learned Ruby, I've learned a bit of JavaScript, I've developed an application from the database to the user interface and deploy that to production. Here is me. I'm really eager to learn new technologies. I think it's way more convincing, the second profile. If I were for the CTO of Doctolib, or for me as a tech recruiter, I'm really more convinced by the second profile than the first one. So that's kind of also the approach that we have to teach people how to learn and to give them very solid foundations, and with the product approach as well.
Yeah, I was gonna like you partly answered that, but like I was gonna ask why Ruby, right? Because so you guys come from Ruby. We have been talking to some French companies that they develop in Ruby. I remember we had worked for FCM, which is like a couple of travel agencies and travel startups like FCM and Air Refund. They're also there. I mean, there's also we use Locomotive CMS, who's created by a French developer, right? The No Coffee agency. We had hosted him in the podcast as well. So is Ruby on Rails very strong in France? Was very strong? What's the status of Ruby on Rails, and why did you choose this one in particular?
Yeah, I mean, in France, it's quite strong. Like there are some scale-ups that are using it. Get around that acquired Drivey. Like Drivey
correct. Yeah, Drivey. Yeah, I
so
forgot that one. Yeah.
Now it was acquired by GetAround, which is a big like car sharing company.
You're right. Yeah, we talked to them. Yeah.
So there are like a bunch of either startup or scale-ups like that are using Ruby. So the ecosystem is very, very good in France. In London as well, there are a few. But ultimately, we have lots of students who are doing JavaScript, right, in their job. So it's not really coming back to that. For us, it's also having the product approach. Ruby on Rails to develop an end-to-end product. For me, it's still the best. And that's part of our curriculum. Our software, like our web development program, is also about our students are pitching ideas, they are building the UI with Figma, they are developing a web application that they put in production with a real URL. So it's not like toy application with localhost URL that you would see in other bootcamps. If you look at the quality of the demo day, we are not showcasing just the few projects that are the most shiny. We are showing everything. You have like hundreds and hundreds of projects on the demo day on our YouTube. And for me, Ruby on Rails allows for someone to achieve great results in terms of the product you will deliver. And as a consequences, as a developer, even if you switch to JavaScript, you have this full stack and product, and product knowledge that's very valuable in the startup environment, because you have someone who think about the feature from the database scheme to the user interface and with a full stack approach. And for me, that's the strength of Rails, especially. It's still, for me, the best framework to really ship product quickly, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. Funnily enough, I always explain that the best tech stack to start developing would be Rails and JavaScript, because in Rails, you don't know why, but things work, right? You code something, you try this, it's like, fuck, it works. I don't know why, but it worked. It's got this magic. Whereas with JavaScript, it's like, you follow the book, you're supposed to program it like that, and then, fuck, it doesn't work. Why, right? So the magic works the other way around. So it's kind of like, it's good to know that there are several languages that are like kind of like easier to code with, like Rails and Python, for instance, and then JavaScript, which is like it prepares you for a complete mess of like why is true not true, or one is not true, and all of that, and then it's kind of like more like on the PHP side of things, right?
And I think when you come to your stack, I mean, to be honest, I'm not teaching anymore, so I've got my education team, my CTO, that are way more up to date with that have
same here.
So for the last 2 years, I'm a bit like I'm an old dude now. I'm a bit outdated in terms of I was still involved in curriculum like two years ago, but for the last 2 years I've been really like assuming my role as CEO, so a bit further from the tech side. But it's for me, JavaScript in terms of the technique, like the stack, the choices you will make, there is way more subjectivity in what you're doing. And so for a beginner, you can be lost. What exactly, like, there was this game of, wow, like, am I using Angular or React or Vue.js, like as a front-end framework? So it's kind of a bit more messy for a beginner to navigate into the JavaScript ecosystem. Whereas I think if you start with a language with Ruby and then the framework like Rails, the community is more is more like team player. Like they all are focused on the same library and best practices, and there are a bit less competition against different libraries. So as a beginner, you're also a bit more, you know how to navigate. You're a bit less lost in the blue of all the kind of different solutions that you could integrate with JavaScript. So, but I think JavaScript has made a lot of changes also recently, and we add more and more JavaScript to our curriculum. We have an extension for our students at the end of the bootcamp that we are working on currently on Node.js to make them even more employable at the end of the bootcamp. So I think it's really good to have the best of both worlds, basically.
Yeah, that's one. Well, you brought something that it's a perfect assist into one of the things I wanted to cover just a little bit later, but let's do it now. So basically, the North Star metric for bootcamps is the employability, right? I know you mentioned in our preparation call that for you is NPS, not placement, but for most of them, and maybe that's tied to the guys doing coming from business schools, that they're like, yeah, we've got 99%. What is exactly word? I think that there's a word, like it's kind of like a placement rate, if I remember correctly, right? And I'm like, well, dude, then you're not a teaching institution, then you are a headhunting company, right? Whereas you might have that also into consideration, but you've got an NPS, right?
Yeah.
You're the only one that mentioned that, by the way. So
yeah, it's quite strange you're right. Like still one of the, of course, one of the key metrics when you're selling a bootcamp to find to train someone to land a job.
yeah,
Of course, your employment rate
it's important.
is very important. So we track that. It's like for like 93% employment rate in our European campus, for instance. So we have this KPI, and we really look at it. It's kind of a key KPI. But in some way, the other one that's as important to us is kind of our NPS after the course, like at the end of the course.
Yeah.
In some way, the job placement rates. How do you compute that? Every bootcamp has its own way. Like, what's the basis of you need to send a survey, then you collect some answers. So the base on which you do the computation is the people who answered. But then it's really a bit tricky. Like, what exactly the question are you asking?
Yes.
Because you might have people who are decided to launch their startups, or we're not really looking for a job. So do they count in your kind of calculus? So my point here is, like, job placement seems something very easy to compute, but if you go into the details, it's very tricky. And if you go to the small dots, that the small stars and each bootcamp has different methodology too. So and if you look at the bootcamp in the US, a lot of them have received fines, fines by the city of New York, or because in some way sometimes they are lying on their placement, or it's kind of because it's a new industry, and I can understand that. Authorities, everyone need to understand that it's not easy. The job market is changing. We have people who want to change freelance career. So what's exactly a job placement? How do you account from that? So I just think it's a metric that's a bit more subjective than the NPS. The NPS doesn't lie. 0 to 10, it's used by Amazon, it's used by every tech company. So in some way, it's for me a better benchmark to compare bootcamps than the job placement, where in some way it's a bit more obscure as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, on the other hand, the placement can also gives you to the credibility, right? It's like, well, people who studied this bootcamp ended up working for Netflix and Spotify and Amazon, right? And for you, it's great. You can place those logos on the website, which is something Let's get into that. Logos on the website. What's your take?
We market our job placement rate on our web. Don't get me wrong. We market our 93% job placement on our website. If you go on the homepage of LeWagon, you will see that's like very high on the page. So it's just, I think, like first, as a new industry, we need to be transparent about how we compute that to share a bit the methods, so that to give transparency to the customer. And also, as part of this transparency, Of course, we also showcase our best success stories of like people who end up a developer at Uber or at very like hot tech companies. But in some way, to be honest, there are also lots of our students who will start with the first job in a smaller digital agency, like doing web development, and it's totally fine. And maybe as their second job after 6 months or a year, they will be in this hot scale up as software engineer as a second step. But I think it's a bit dangerous to kind of use this big brand, Netflix, Google, Facebook, and pretend, that everyone will get a job there. I mean, of course, it will not happen. Like if you're graduating 4,000 students per year, part of them might have like top jobs. But to be honest, these people might already have some engineering background, for instance, when they start and a lot of other students will start with more local startups or tech agencies. And they might get there, but that might take them 2 steps basically. So I think we need to be a bit more. We try to find the right balance between like showcasing like success stories that make people dream, but at some point staying humble and just also giving some facts and some things that are a bit more like kind of transparent to the customer.
Yeah, because the logos on the website are always like a double-edged sword, right? Like for instance, in our industry as software developers, you want to have the logos of your client on your website, but when you start, you don't have any, right? And then you start working for some, and you're protected by an NDA, and then you cannot disclose that you're working for these companies, right? Or I don't know, some companies maybe you don't want to have on your website because I don't know, we work for Real Madrid, we don't want to have that logo on the website, So,
but let me ask you something. Like, let's say you want to join a bootcamp.
Yeah.
And you see one bootcamp, and for instance, a lot of bootcamps that are showcasing the background of their course author or their teacher. And so you go to bootcamp A, and they would say you will have a course by a software engineer at Google, or co-created or co-designed by a software engineer at Google. It's very convincing for yourself as a beginner. You're like, wow, I'm going to learn the best practice. But at the end of the day, what matters, of course, the curriculum matters, like creating a curriculum that's cutting edge and state of the art. But what matters is who will be the teacher spending hours and hours with you during 2 months so that repeating the same things like with the right education approach, so that you get it, so that you have this aha moment where you understand finally these concepts. And that won't be the guy from Google. That will be some other teacher, basically. And so for us, it's when you go to a lot of bootcamps, especially new ones or the one that raise money, they leverage a lot the brand of the company from where they source their instructor. And I think it's not it's not something that should be the first thing that you look at when you're considering bootcamps. You should really be concerned about, do I have good teachers, basically? And it's a beginner program. So, I mean, to teach the basic of programming, the Google, the software engineer at Google might be a terrible teacher because they will be focused on more like very advanced patterns, and they might be terrible at teaching you what's a variable, a loop, or parameters within a method,
That's a really good point. And I'm not going to be naming and shaming. So we started collaborating with one bootcamp back in the day in Barcelona. That was a competitor of yours. And we were invited to give classes because they were doing Ruby on Rails back in the day, right? And I remember that I think it was our CTO who was being a teacher there, right? So our CTO was there, but basically he was the underdog in the room because there was a guy from Netflix, somebody from Spotify, somebody from Rakuten. We're like the smallest company in the room, right? And as the cohorts advanced, we became the biggest company because the other guys quit, and the former students became teachers, right? And so we went from being the smallest company to like the biggest company. We were still like not even 10 people. And we were like, the fundamentals here are pretty wrong because the quality, or what you mentioned is right? So they sell you that it's people from Netflix, Google, and whatnot creating this, but they are not teaching it. Or they were teaching it in the first cohort, the first year, but then they quit. And it's all former students teaching, which I don't think it's fundamentally wrong, but it's not as good or as great as people with the real experience in the industry because I don't know. They don't have, most of them, they've never had a project in production, right? So they can teach you the theory, but not the practice.
Yeah.
And I know you solve this in a very particular way because you've got your own tech team, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hardest kind of operational challenge for every bootcamp is like, how do you get great teacher
Every cohort.
who are also industry experts and practitioners
Correct.
and up to
Exactly.
date with the tech industry? How do you like kind of solve this tricky challenge? And for I will detail a bit what we do at LeWagon, but it's a talent war. I mean,
It is.
yesterday, I mean, like there is a bootcamp in Latin America that raised a lot of money, MicroVerse. I mean,
Yeah, I know them.
we have lots of bootcamps that are actually headhunting for teachers. We have lots of, I mean, our teachers get hunted by competitors every day. So the way we do it, I mean, for me, if you have someone that's teaching 100% of his time, to be honest, I doubt that he will be the right person to teach you like technology, because it means he doesn't have time to really
work on project.
Exactly. But on the same time, we also tried back in the day to work with freelance. I mean, to work with really software engineers from amazing scale-ups in Paris. So very, very brilliant developers. And sometimes they were terrible at teaching or over-engineering stuff, or like going into very advanced patterns and not understanding that the student was not getting the very fundamental things right. And so in some way, and so they were totally missing kind of the education approach. So the way we do is like,
you're right.
Of course, part of your fresh graduates, they can be amazing teaching assistant for the next session, because especially on the first weeks of the program, they went through that. So they know exactly where students are struggling and they know how to explain that. So for the first weeks of the program where you go through the basics, you can have fresh graduates from your previous cohorts that might be a very good job at teaching this first, I mean, not teaching, but assisting on these first weeks. So you need a mix for us. We have now alumni, because we are an old bootcamp, we are like an 8-year-old bootcamp. We have some alumni who've been freelancing and being software developer for more than 5 or 6 years, and they also love to teach. And this is the person you're looking at. People who maybe have done a bootcamp, but like a long time ago, so they know this process of teaching to beginners. They've taught a bit, and also they have started to freelance a bit. So in some way, that's how we are doing. We built this community of more than 1,000 teachers and teaching assistants. Some of them graduated 2 years ago. Some of them graduated like 5 years ago and have been working in tech company for more than 5 years. And on every teacher, because we have our own LMS platform, we have all the feedback from every student on every teacher. And this data is gold, because here we can see there is no bullshit, there is no lying on this data. It's really, you can see, I don't know, Maria or any students will say, okay, Julien was the best teacher in the batch. He was patient and at the same time very precise. And we base all our staffing on this data about our teachers. Mm-hmm. In some way, it's like I think one of our advantages is like building, engaging an alumni community, but not just of people that are fresh graduates, also people with experience, engaging them, building this community, and also having the data to be sure that in this 1,000 community of freelance, everyone is really has amazing feedback from the students. So that's our kind of the way we do that. We kind of engage this community, and at the same time, we have the data to be sure that they are both meeting student needs in terms of technical expertise and education expertise.
Yeah, because one of the things that is really important here is to avoid diluting the quality of your cohorts, of your teaching in every generation of students, right? In every cohort, because then it means that you don't have a brand, that what you've got is a business model, but not a brand, right? And one of the things I admire about LeWagon, that's why you're in this podcast and some others are not, is that you've got a brand. You managed to build a brand, not on top of the shoulders of other companies, but rather on like sticking to your principles and making it happen. One of the other things that I think it's really worth mentioning is that you guys bootstrapped the business for 7 years, if I remember correctly. So, other people made it, they wanted to go faster, or they knew they were going to make money with this, and they raised funds at the beginning. So therefore, they were tied to their investors They were forced to do things in a certain way. Maybe they had to hit the metrics, compromising their values and the way they do things and methodologies. And that's why they switched from doing two programming languages to just one and things like that, right? Or changing very drastically in their strategy and burning a lot of people. Whereas you kind of like did it the slow way, slow, safe, but still you're a lot of people, and you're still alive after 8, 9, almost 10 years, right? So congrats for that. But if you can explain a little bit how was the starting period from the business perspective, it would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's really like a kind of a crazy story. Like we just, to be honest, we never thought about being in 45 like cities or scaling this way. We just, with
so how many people is in the company right now?
It's
Sorry,
150.
150 people. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
So we started with Sebastian, my CTO, and we're like, let's do the best curriculum, and let's also equip that with our own LMS platform, our own teaching platform, just to make the experience nicer for the students and for the teachers. And let's build the best curriculum we can. We did the first cohort with 15 students in Paris. Then we did the second. We said, okay, we had NPS at 100 for the first cohort, and then we said, okay. Yeah. But still, we knew that there was some content to adjust. So we iterated on the second version of the curriculum. We improved the platform. And so we did that like for nearly a year, like iterating. And the NPS were still like 90 to 100 for every cohort. And we started to have very engaged alumni who were like, your product is amazing. You have changed my life. And some of them say, yeah, I want to reproduce that in Brussels. I want to reproduce that in Bordeaux, in France. I want to reproduce that in Amsterdam. So we started having people that ask us about, can I open a branch in my country? And that's how we started, like first with the franchise model and also opening some of the campuses ourselves. And actually, the franchise was a crazy adventure because, imagine like franchising a bootcamp. It's a very expensive product, very brand sensitive product. So you need to make it right. You need to master, like to be sure that the experience and the NPS will be amazing in
the
every.
Same,
yeah, because then it's a franchise. So it's kind of, in some way, you can really miss the point and don't have control on what's delivered locally on another country.
The Barcelona chapter was a franchise, right?
Exactly, it was a chapter.
Or still is. I don't know.
But, no, it's not anymore. Like I will tell you, like fast forward, like we
sure.
We consolidated the group like 2 years ago. But
nice.
And so the franchise was a great constraint for us of staying lean because no need of money, controlling everything, not reporting to investors, being free, but at the same time, a big constraint on the NPS and the quality, because then it's your product in the hands of other people and you need really to make it right. So for us, it was a great scaling constraint. How do we reproduce that in so many countries, keeping a very high student satisfaction? So it was this way that we progressively scaled with one flagship program in web development. And then after like 3 years, we added the part-time format for people who work and can't take 2 months off. We added a new data science bootcamp as well. We kind of diversified the offering. And 2 years ago, after 6 years of Bootstrapped, in some way we say, okay, if we want to get even bigger, we need to invest a bit in the marketing and sales after 6 years.
Yeah.
Not to totally change our DNA and who we are, but just the market is so competitive that in some way, if we want our voice to be heard in Spain, our voice to be heard in the Netherlands, we need a bit of money. We need a bit of control on the franchise to make them accelerate, because we want our voice to continue and our values to continue to be shared, and the competition is fierce. So we decided to raise money at this point, like 2 years ago, to actually consolidate the group, build a central team for marketing, for sales, for program management as well, like the bootcamp operations. And and since then we've been like consolidating all the franchise within a big education group, and also developing our activity with enterprise, so training some teams within large companies.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it seems that you were able to follow this roadmap because you were independent, right? One of the blessings of having a bootstrap business, and that's why I want to feature more bootstrap businesses in this podcast, because I think it's a healthier way to build products. It's not the only way, I'm not saying it's better, but it's pretty healthy, and it allowed you to follow your idea and to try these things without the pressure of having to deliver KPIs and metrics to investors, right? However, you raised the fundraising round in during the pandemic or right
Just
before the
before,
pandemic,
yeah.
just before. Um, I think that you did it the right way. There comes a time in the life of a company in which you have been operating for many years. The meat and potatoes of the industry. You know that investing €1 here will get you 1.5 here, and so maybe it was the right time for you to consolidate, grow, and kind of like go for a market that was getting consolidated. A lot of bootcamps had disappeared prior to the pandemic because it was not fashionable anymore. It was not trendy. Maybe they were not making much money, and they realized it was a lot of effort, right? What was your decision thought like, and why did you decide to raise funds if you were a profitable business?
Yeah, as you say, there are a few reasons. The first one, to be honest, like we not necessarily like needed to raise funds. I mean, we were a profitable company, very healthy.
Yeah,
Unlike a lot of competitors who are, like very like losing a lot of money and burning a lot of cash. So we were
yeah,
a very good foundation. But in
yeah,
some way, in terms of, at some point as a founder after 8 years, it's like the competition. We were maybe able to bootstrap the company, 9 years ago, because also the momentum was a bit different, right? The
exactly.
industry was very different. Since then, the industry has grown 10 times. There are more than 500 bootcamps in the US. So that's totally exploded.
Wow.
100,000 bootcamp graduates last year. It's crazy. And so in some way, the market is different. And we also were, as founder, you come to a point where you say, okay, maybe we need a bit of this investor pressure, if it's an healthy one, to go the extra mile, so to push us to accelerate or be something bigger. So in some way, it was also like to give us a big push, a big punch in the face, like, okay, let's
Yeah.
go after something bigger. Otherwise, we might get asleep on our model, and in some way
Mm,
continue to do things as we are doing, but that might be also risky, because in some of the markets, competitor might raise a lot of money, burn that into marketing, and maybe endanger a bit some of our franchise. So we say, okay, maybe
mm,
that's the moment where personally to have like the right maybe push, and also in terms of the market, it's the right time to consolidate, to be more efficient globally, because the bootcamp was amazing, the franchise, very high NPS. But for the marketing and the sales, for instance, or for the outcomes, the career service, in some way, we were still a bit amateur. Every franchise was doing a bit their way, because there was not centralized process and team to define the best practices. That's the beauty of a group. It's that you can also hire some experts in marketing, in admissions, in career service, and they really help you to improve this part of the product,
correct.
that in some way were still not to the standard that we wanted in some of the franchise. So for us, it was also a way to get better on all the user journey, from the marketing to the outcomes, basically.
I thought, like, for me, and maybe as an outsider, but I'm pretty passionate about education and teaching, and I know that the cultural differences matter, right? And I don't think that maybe a US based bootcamp would necessarily have a lot of success in Europe, because the way we teach things in Europe is much more different than that they do in the US or in Russia or in China, for that matter,
Yeah.
right? But it seems that this is becoming a market where there is a race for the top, and there will be a consolidated top three, top five, top 10, and the rest will disappear because they're turning into this marketing budgets war, right? And only the strongest will survive. So, what's your forecast for the industry? And do you think there could be like only one really big player who becomes the standard of the industry, or there'll be a European and a US and an Asian one and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, first, I think that it's interesting what you say. Like, if you look at how many higher education brands can you name? How many like kind of edtech company are worth more than a billion? Very few compared to
Yep.
the size of the market. So in some way, education has always been a very very fragmented market. Either like and there is not so many like company with big revenue and big brands. So it's very like, at the same time, there are tons of local players, but not that many global ones. So I think that there are lots of local players who are doing a great job. They won't scale. If they are like persistent and resilient, they might continue to grow a business a bit as if you have a small agency, a small developer agency. You might not like reach like 10 million revenue, but you're doing quality work with a small team. And so I guess there will still be a lot of small bootcamp, local small bootcamps that might survive. The one resilient, the one really passionate, because the one that are business driven, at some point they will say, okay, I'm not making it, not worth it. Like let's do another business where the margins are higher and the growth opportunities is bigger. So I think there will still be lots of local players, and there will be some market consolidation. But this market consolidation, to me, will be more in educate for groups of bootcamps. Like there will be some private equity money to consolidate, buy some bootcamps here and there, and a bit do what we've been doing with LeWagon for the last 2 years, consolidate a group, but maybe a group with different brands. I don't know which bootcamp in Germany, I don't know which other bootcamp in Spain, like something like that. And that has been the model of education. If you look at higher education, companies like Laureate, Galileo, Honoris in Africa, these are finance people, backed by private equity money. And what they're doing is they're buying lots of schools and then consolidating a group with maybe enterprise sales and finance at the top level, and then each school staying independent. But we are in a business that doesn't scale that much. I mean, if you scale at 2 digits, if you're a bootcamp, it's great. I mean, like of course, when you start, if I do like 20 students the first year, it's easy to scale like 3 times or 4 times the second year. But then after 5 years, if you have like a 30-40% growth, it's great, because like you are training thousands of students, and it's not that easy to scale. If you are honest, it's immersive program. It needs a lot of teaching. It's not like self-paced online courses. It's not like MOOC. So in some way, the scalability is not amazing. I mean, it's not amazing. It's not big as the SaaS industry. And so the model is more to do some roll-ups of group and buying lots of players. That's how you create growth, basically.
Yeah, because you mentioned 2 things here. One is the scalability in terms of structure, right? The other one is scalability over time, right?
Yeah.
And by that saying, for instance, like there was a lot of value, and there still is, of getting into Y Combinator, right? But the Y Combinator companies that we got in batch number 1 to 5 or 10 were, Dropbox, SendGrid, MailChimp, things like that.
Now it's Rocket Internet, like Y Combinator.
Now it's like, my cousin got into Y Combinator, and
and also I think that as you say, they were like on big disruptive company like Dropbox or Airbnb, and they move more to like maybe some copycats. Okay, let's do Lambda School in LATAM, or let's do something that works.
Correct.
Something that works in Africa or whatever. So I think they really changed a bit, like the kind of company that they're backing. And for me, in this way, like it's interesting because the trend I see in my market, kind of adult continuing education, continuing tech education, is with the pandemic, a lot of the cards have been shuffled. I mean, there are lots of wrong thinking right now in the edtech market. If you look at the money that was invested in edtech just in Europe, I think it's crazy. It's like 21 billion. It's just like it's just insane. It has totally exploded in 2021 because of the pandemic. And now I think, we might have a new wave of COVID, but crossing fingers. But getting back to a post-pandemic world, to reality, it's sure that every student in the world would rather have a physical course with great teachers and great classmates than doing a self-paced online course with a 30-minute mentoring per week. It's obvious, In the pandemic, that's why there was the crisis of the higher education. Why would I pay Harvard like 100,000 per year when at the end the value proposition is like it's Coursera or it's like Netflix of education,
and it's for free. Fucking YouTube is for free.
Exactly. And so in some way, we can see a similar trend. We have with the pandemic, there have been a lot of money invested in like Microverse or Lambda School or ISA players.
Yep.
That, as you say, are more about outcomes than training at the end. It's really like not the right shift. Their business model is based on job placement. So in some way, they don't really need to have the best curriculum or best NPS. What matters to them is placing their students. But if you do the maths,
it's more like sales.
But if you do the maths, what it will cost you? Imagine you do this kind of bootcamp. When you pay back on your job, it might cost you like 15,000 to 20,000. And maybe the education experience won't be as good as a bootcamp that's really invested in the curriculum like other bootcamp. And so if you, in some way, people need to understand like bootcamp like LeWagon, we have like public funding in France or Germany where you don't pay, it's paid by the government. We have like very, very low interest loans by banks. So would you rather do a 6,000 bootcamp with a close to 0% interest rate loan and ensuring that you have like real teachers and very a lot of added value, or take an online ISA player and at the end pay 20,000 on the next 5 years after you get a job, And if the job placement rate of the first bootcamp like LeWagon is close to 100%, you get the same at the end. It's just like you get more value for your money. So I think with the ISA and all the money that has been invested into this kind of online bootcamps, in some way they are pouring some money into ads. Pay only if you get a job, pay only if you get a job. And it's for me, it's a bit like it's kind of the only message that customers are hearing. And customers maybe step back and say, okay, what am I going to pay? This is not like free. This is a course where I will pay back on my salary. And as every bootcamp has, 100% job placement, at the end, it really matters. Like what will be the end price I will be paying within 5 years? And what's the actual education I will receive? And so people, I think that now with the revolution of education, people need to ask themselves this kind of very simple question. What do I have? What do I receive as an education for my money? Because all the bootcamps have the same employment rates. So it really matters. Who will be my teachers? Is it on site? Is it online? Like what's the thing that brings me more value for the money I spend, basically?
I mean, it's spot on. Basically, two things here. We all know the old mantra that goes that if something is free, then if a product is free, then you're the product, right? So it's very simple case of extrapolating it and applying it here. And the second one is like having this conversation confirms me my theory that it's not a rule that we've got at MarsBased. So basically, like when we've got somebody coming from a bootcamp, it's kind of like usually it's kind of like a red flag unless it's LeWagon, because that's the only one that we can like take a look into. The rest are like don't know, because mostly they only teach one development language, right? One programming language. So it's like
That's where, don't get me wrong. I don't say that ISA bootcamps are not good.
No. I just one to their own.
You just say like they are raising a lot of funds. They are like
they're more short-sighted.
They are looking to edtech money, saying they will have tremendous growth because they are pure online. They have kind of a scalable model. And I just say it might be a right recipe for some people because they are not in a city where there is a physical bootcamp. Or I just say it's not free. And people should just step back and do their due diligence, call students, call alumni of different bootcamps to see what you get for your money, and not just listen to the marketing campaigns that are totally crazy, because all the money invested into edtech is being spent on Google Ads right now, and so you have tons of campaigns that are displaying these kind of messages. But coming back to your answer about do employers, at the end, what matters is like, do local recruiter trust a bootcamp brand? If I'm the CEO of a Spanish startup, do I think that the bootcamp graduate from LeWagon are great hires? And this is only the quality of the product, and it's a steady work. In France, a company like Doctolib, they have more than 20 developers from LeWagon, more than 20.
Nice.
And they even have an onboarding package only for our students, and that takes time, just like because you get the first one and then people are satisfied of this first hire, and then you get a second one, and then you get referral, and
that's phenomenal.
And that's how you create an employer brand for tech recruiters, basically.
That's great proof. So I was just laughing because I mentioned that next week I'm speaking at Get Me Hired by LeWagon. No, it's actually in 2 hours. I just got the notification. It's at 3 p.m. So that's why I was like, oh,
Great
fuck, it's
timing.
today. Yeah. And I thought like, I was like, okay, I've got to do so many things. I'm running out of time today. I'm like, oh, fuck, I forgot about that. Anyways, two quick questions to wrap this up because I think we could be speaking for hours. We're getting into like very philosophical things, and maybe we'll have to invite you again. But what couple of two things are really quick. First off is this is the signature question of the podcast. Basically, we want people to share their technical fuck ups because mostly it's people coming from technical backgrounds speaking here, and we've all deleted the database from production. We've all released something that we shouldn't have. We've all, sent an email CCing the wrong person with some password, things like that. So what is the biggest technical fuck up you can share and that we can learn from?
Uh, yeah, I'm
You
not.
have to own it. It's got to be
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I'm not the CTO, so I might not tell the story the right way. So just a disclaimer. Like it's a question
Yeah,
that I will need to
let's
ask
see.
Sebastian, my CTO. I think at the beginning we had kind of uh, like I think like a token. I don't remember the exact story because it was like 6 years ago, but a token issue with GitHub. So all of a sudden we gave access to kind of private repository of a big scale up in Paris, like because we had one of our teachers there. So it was
Okay.
kind of a one of big fail. I don't remember the exact process. Then I mean, there was no leak, and so and we just changed a bit the process. But we have an intern who just like share the token that should not be shared publicly, and it was something that was kind of a private key. So it was. I don't have the full story, but basically for a second, giving access to kind of private repository from a tech company. But that was yeah.
Don't worry, we will not tell
And
Dr.
but
Leap
for
or
me,
Drivey, whoever
we
it
don't
was, but
we don't have that many. I mean, like the
yeah,
real thing that we have is technical depth, to be honest, because like when you have a company with coders,
yeah,
sometimes you are reinventing the wheel. For instance, we've developed our commercial website with Ruby on Rails. We have our own CMS that we build ourselves for our website.
yeah, yeah,
And that's fucked up. That's totally fucked up because like with the
yeah.
marketing velocity you need, just take like a built-in CMS or no-code solution. Don't go for and in some way, sometimes we are more paying the price of trying to build everything in-house. So that's, I think, more this kind of mistake that we're doing. It's more sometimes building instead of buying, I guess.
Then maybe it would be a great occasion to take a look into Locomotive CMS, or like they're coming up with a new product that's even more marketing oriented. So it's kind of like more like the WordPress of Ruby, which
But I
sounds
like
like a paradox, but
I like
like
as
yeah,
well, like there is this kind of new no code. I mean, the
yeah,
ecosystem of no code is way more powerful. I mean, we bootstrap with no code tools back in the day, like Typeform and Zapier and so
yeah.
on. Now, I think like with the advanced integration, or if you package Webflow with
Oh,
edtech mode,
totally, yeah,
I mean, there is this new. I mean, there's this new revolution in product development where you have a product building team
yeah,
that might use no code tools, and then you have the core product. And
yeah, exactly.
it allows more velocity in testing quickly ideas. It's also maybe changing the role of the product manager, who needs to be way more hands-on on these tools.
And
And
they can actually create stuff and
yeah,
ship
and
stuff.
that's
Yeah,
something we are exploring even for our commercial websites. Can we have kind of a more no-code, quick and not quick and dirty, but quick a website where we can test new courses if they have traction in the market, and maybe some more structured websites with more like pages for or 45 campuses or different courses. That's a bit more like robust, but in some way a bit not necessarily the right setup to test a new course quickly. So there is some kind of we have this kind of discussion internally just for being more lean, I guess.
great. And the last question is, how can we help you? How can we help Boris? Can we help LeWagon? Is it something we can do from our audience and community?
Yeah, I mean, like we are always looking for community partners. So if you are
Nice.
looking for great developers, connect to our local campuses, go to the demo day, go to the Get Me Hired events. If you want to do like co-branded events with us, so we are doing tons of events with free coding workshops, free design workshops. So for us, it's really about, it's a global company, but with very local community.
I know.
And I think like, yeah, for me, the best is like to reach out to us, to come to our demo, to meet our teams and to contribute like as a independent partner or as a hiring partner with us basically.
That's phenomenal. So thank you very much for your support, and thank you for keeping the active ecosystem in Barcelona, because it's only basically for some months now. It was only like MarsBased, LeWagon, and 2 or 3 other companies organizing events in Barcelona in these turbulent times. But I think it's safe enough now to kind of like go back to events. So keep the development ecosystem happy.
We missed that a lot, and hopefully we'll be able to do like lots of big events again.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. Let me know if you're ever in Barcelona. I'd love to host you in our offline events at Startup Grind. That would be fantastic as well. So thank you very much, boys.
Definitely. Thanks a lot, Alex.